So last lecture, we ended up by talking about services, and I told you to read about settlements. So let's start with urbanization today, since it is important to know about urbanization before we get on to urban patterns. So what is urbanization? It is the process by which the population of urban settlements grow in size. This urbanization is based on two dimensions. One is the increase in the percentage of people living in urban settlements. So that's the percentage. If the country has population number X, how many of those are living in urban settlements? In developed countries, 79% of us live in urban settlements, compared to just 50% in developing countries. So on average, 50% of people in developing countries live in urban settlements, whereas in developed countries, US, Canada, UK, etc., 79%, the average is 79%. In fact, it varies from one developing region to another. For instance, in Latin America, 78% of Latin Americans live in urban areas, whereas only 40% of sub-Saharan Africans live in urban areas. In South Asia, in fact, which includes India, only 35% of people in South Asia live in urban areas. So that average for developing countries is 50%, but as we see, Latin America is 78, Sub-Saharan Africa is only 40, and South Asia is 35%. So when we talk about people living in urban areas, urbanization, we are looking at the percentage of people. Then we are also looking at the increase in number of people living in urban settlements. Is it growing? If it is growing, that is leading to further increase. Another thing we need to know is that when urbanization was rapidly occurring in developed countries like US, Canada, Germany, etc., it was mainly due to socio-economic development. So urbanization was going side by side with socio-economic development. But nowadays in developing countries, there are two factors that is accelerating urbanization in developing countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Latin America, and also in Asia. That increase in number is due mainly to natural increase rate. They are still giving birth to many kids, so the natural increase rate is high, and also due to rural-urban migration, people moving from, people moving from the countryside, from rural areas to cities. In fact, for developing countries as a whole, 50% of half of the fact when 50% of the people that are responsible for urbanization move from countryside or rural areas to cities. The other 50% is due to natural increase rate. That is for developing countries as a whole. So the two major factors that is driving urbanization, increase in people and percentage in cities and urban areas in general, are one, natural increase rate, which is between 2 and 3% in a number of developing countries, and secondly, mass migration to urban areas. In Sub-Saharan Africa, it is a little bit different. 75% of the growth in urbanization is due to natural increase. In countries like Kenya and Nigeria, natural increase rate is as high as 3%. And total fertility rate is as high as 4.5%. So natural increase rates account 75% of the reason, the 75% is due to natural increase rate, whereas only 1/4 is due to rural urban migration. And that makes sense because we said up till now, even though people are flooding cities, only 40% of Sub-Saharan Africans live in cities, 60% live in villages in rural areas. But the number is increasing. So those that already live in the cities are giving birth to many kids, accounting for further rise in urbanization, whereas only 1/4 is due to rural urban migration. 75% due to those already in the cities giving back to many kids in sub-Saharan Africa. But for developing countries as a whole is 50-50. 50% due to urbanization, rural urban migration, and 50% due to natural increase. Okay, let's run through these three things that Lewis Worth said that makes urban settlements different from rural ones. One is the large size. Urban settlements have a large number of people living there. The area might be small, but large number of people live in this area. The second one is high density. There are so many people crowded in an urban area. The land area might be small, but there is a heavy concentration of people in urban areas. Unlike rural areas where you can have a large land area, but there are very few people living. We know that in Oklahoma. We have several towns, we have some few we can call villages, where in the land area might be reasonably large, but only few, perhaps 1,000 or 2,000 people living there, some less than that. So the density is low compared to an urban area where the density is high. The most interesting one is social heterogeneity. That means social diversity. Urban areas are very diverse. Diverse in terms of population, diverse in terms of racial composition, diverse in terms of religious or beliefs, diverse in terms of sexual orientation, etc., etc. But we see more of social homogeneity in a small town or in a village, in a rural area. For instance, imagine a rural area where there is only one church, there is only one gas station, there is only one grocery store. People know each other. People know each other because some of them are even intermarriage, interrelated. Some of them are in the same church, they belong to the same club or whatever. They know each other and they look at each other. So if a child does something that is off the track, that can lead to scorn. For instance, imagine John Johnson, a 17-year-old, has a 21-year-old friend. The 21-year-old friend just came out from a trade center or a job and met John Johnson and gave John Johnson, 17-year-old, a cigarette to smoke. And John Johnson was smoking the cigarette, enjoying. And then a church member or a friend of John Johnson's mom saw John Johnson, what? And immediately she calls John Johnson's mom, I saw your son, John, smoking cigarette. And then John Johnson comes home after school and said, hi, Mom. And Mom says, hi, John. Immediately, John knows something is wrong. You started smoking cigarette. Oh, no, Mom. You started smoking cigarette at 17. I will not name names, but somebody saw you just about half an hour ago. You are smoking cigarette. That's a serious problem for John Johnson. In a big city, John Johnson, especially if he's tall, will smoke a cigarette. Nobody is going to ask him in a big city. Because there is not that social bond, there is not that sharp connection in a big city. You have all your freedom in a big city. You can do whatever you want as long as it's within the ambit of the law, but nobody is watching you so closely like in a small rural area. So the social heterogeneity in the big city is there. You can do what you want to do as long as it's within the law. You can practice your own sexual orientation. You can do your own job. You can join a club, etc. that is doing some things that, whatnot. But the issue there in that big city, there is so much competition for jobs, etc. Not everybody is going to do well. Then secondly, you have to specialize for you to survive in the big city. You have to have a specialized job for you to be marketable. Added to that, 400,000 people in Tulsa, 4 million in Chicago. People live in these big cities. Most of the interaction with the lawyer, with the cashier at the grocery store is contractual. You don't have that strong social bond that you have in a small town, such that it's mainly contractual. People live in Chicago, 4 million people that are isolated, that are lonely. TV and telephone is not all. They don't have that social connection with people. They have their freedom, they can do what they want to do, but that social bond you can have in that village pastor, that village church, that small town bond, the social bond, people caring for each other, it's not there in the big cities. So in the midst of 4 million people in Chicago, people can be lonely within that city. So the social heterogeneity is social diversity, but you might not be able to get that. It's competitive to start with, and you might not have that social cohesion as you might have in a small town. Any question or comment? So where is the population going sharply? It is going sharply. Percentage of the world living in urban areas has increased and continues to increase, but most of the increases is taking place in the developing world, in Latin America, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and increasingly these days in Asia. I've already told you about 79% of people in the developed world are urbanized, living in urban areas compared to, on average, 50% in the developed world. In 2008, it became 51% urban, 49% rural. As of 2018, it was 55% of us living in urban areas and 45% of people living in the rural areas across the world. Let's take a look at this map. What do we notice here? We see Canada, United States, and as I said, 78% of people in Latin America living in urban areas. So it's not to be surprised to us, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, amongst others, large number of people, 75% or more, live in urban areas. Central Europe, Northern Europe, and Western Europe, Saudi Arabia, Libya, Kuwait, and others. But Japan, of course, and Australia and New Zealand. But the rest of the world, it's below. Look at South Asia, below 50% of people live in urban areas, as in most parts of Sub-Saharan Africa. So it is clearly here that a good number of people live in rural areas. You see, just 55% as of 2018 of the world's population living in cities. But the only developing region that has so many people living in urban areas is Latin America. Let's talk about mega and meta cities. A mega city is one with 10 million people or more. A meta city is one with 20 million people or more. Most of these meta and mega cities that are growing very sharply are in developing countries. For instance, of the 37 mega cities across the world, only 9 can be found in the developed world. Of these 37 mega cities, 10 million or more, 11 of them are meta cities, 20 million people or more living in one urban area. A case in point is Mexico City, which has about 23 million people. So of the 11 meta cities, only 3 are found in the developed world: Seoul, South Korea, New York City, and Tokyo, where in the city and its suburb is 20 million or more. The rest are found in developing countries. One interesting statistics is that of the fastest growing cities in the world, of the first 100 fastest growing cities in the world, only 4 can be found in the developed world. 96 of the fastest growing cities are in the developing world. The 4 that can be found in the developed world are Austin in Texas, Las Vegas in Nevada, Atlanta in Georgia, and Suwon in South Korea. The rest of the 96 are in the developing world. In fact, there are 13 cities in the developing world that are growing more than 4% compared to just 4 in the developed world. Of the 13 cities whose annual growth rate is 4% or more, 5 of them are in Africa, 3 of them in India, 4 of them somewhere else in Asia, and 1 of them in Latin America. So there are like 17 cities growing more than 4%. Of those 17, only 4 I mentioned recently are in the developed world, which includes Austin and Atlanta. The other 13 are in the developing world. A city like Lagos in Nigeria, a city like Cairo in Egypt, growing 4% or more annually. And this is problematic in developing countries because here, urbanization is not reflective of socioeconomic development. Urbanization is reflective of increase in natural increase rate very high, and secondly, mass rural to urban migration. Unlike developed countries where urbanization is commensurate to socioeconomic improvement. Next lecture, we'll watch a clip when we'll see clearly what's the multiple problems faced by cities in developing countries. Any questions so far or comment about
Made
meta?
at the right time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I had so many technical issues with my computer at the moment, so I'm here. I finally
Okay.
got it fixed.
Good, good, good. I did not hear your voice early, so I knew you were not most likely here. Thanks, you're here now. Good, good to know that you've joined
Thank you.
us here. So I was just explaining about a meta city and a mega city. A mega city is one with 10 million people or more living in an urban area. A meta city is one with 20 million people or more living in that city. And most of the growth is taking place in developing countries. And it's problematic. We'll figure out that clearly next lecture. This is where the cities are growing very fast. What do we see here? Those in purple are growing more than 4% annually. Look at them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, growing very fast. 5 of them in Africa. This is must be in Kuwait or so. Then we have those that are growing between 3 and 3.9%. We have some in Asia, mainly in India, in China. Then we have a good number of them in Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. Then we have those that are growing below 3%. Even a 2% growth is a significant growth. Look at several cities. Just a few of them in the United States. What do we observe? Europe, none growing that fast. Remember, Europe is already urbanized. United States is already urbanized. So the growth rate is now taking place mainly in developing countries, and they are growing very fast. If you take a close look at the map, almost all of these cities are in developing countries, developing regions, from below 3% to 3.9 to 4%. So, as I said earlier, of the 100 fastest growing cities in the world, 96 of them are in developing countries. So in summary, we've looked at rural areas that focus, rural settlement, I ask you to read that, focus on agriculture and small number of services. Urban settlement have mainly consumer, some public service, and heavy concentration of business services. We see that consumer services attack consumers from market areas of different sizes, from the hamlet to the village to the town to the city. And we also see the disproportionate number of business services clustered in world cities and how they have influenced the global economy one way or the other. We'll address those last lecture. Now let's move to our penultimate, our last but one topic for the semester, and that is urban patterns. So by the end of next lecture, hopefully we should be able to look at why services cluster in the central business district, which we normally call in America downtown. We're also going to look at the distribution of population in urban areas. Why are some areas have more residential, others don't? We're also going to see the difference between the structure of cities in North America versus Europe. There is a difference in structure, the urban patterns, the urban structure. Urban areas are structured differently in North America than in Europe. Then we're going to look at urban patterns in developing countries. We'll look at a few patterns, then we'll look at a clip about Dhaka in Bangladesh, which really encapsulates the problems and the issues that most big cities, big urban areas in developing countries face. And we'll round up next lecture, which is also part of your role-playing exercise, which will be an assignment, I should say, where we're going to discuss some major challenges we face in American cities, North American cities, and similarly in some other cities in the developed world, but we'll focus mainly issues. We have multiple challenges we face in inner cities and suburbs here in North America. Okay, please ask a number of questions and comment. I'll be posing series of questions as we go along. First of all, a central city, we'll just call it a city, but the technical name is a central city. It's an urban settlement that has been legally incorporated into an independent self-governing unit. What do we mean by this? Every city is known as a municipality. It is a self-governed body. It's a self-governed unit. Every city has its independence, legally, an independent area that is governed by people. Who heads a city? Who is the head of every city, of any city?
The mayor, right?
Yes, the mayor. And you have councillors that work with the mayor. So every city would have a mayor, whether it's Clamo with 19,000 people or Tulsa with 400,000 people. Every city has a mayor and the councillors that work with the mayor. One thing, another thing we need to know about is city. A city should have some responsibilities and some duties, and also city dwellers equally have some rules to play, some responsibilities. What are some of the things that every city should provide for people living in that city? Some of the services that a city should provide.
Like transportation, health and safety, like police force and fire department, right?
Yes. Added to that, they should also take care of utilities, water, sewage, trash pickup, provide basic electricity, and the like. So every city has that responsibility. Also, as a city dweller, you also should play your own part. You have to mow your lawn. If you don't mow your lawn, the grass goes above 2 feet. The city whatnot will come around and perhaps give you a warning that your lawn should be mown. If you continue to persist, you don't mow it, you might be taken to court, the city court. It's likewise your trash, you have to put it up regularly for it to be picked up. So those are some of the responsibilities as city dwellers you have to fulfill. But the city must provide utilities, trash pickup, sewage disposal, electricity, water. Those are basic things every city has to provide. Now let's talk about the concept urban area. An urban area consists of the city itself and its surrounding built-up areas that is adjacent to the city, which we call suburbs. So if you are talking about the city of Tulsa, for instance, you have the city of Tulsa and its suburbs. Bixby, Sapulpa. What else? What are some of the other suburbs of Tulsa, apart from Bixby and Sapulpa?
Catoosa.
Okay, yeah. So all of those, Catoosa amongst others, are part of the suburb of the city of Tulsa. So the urbanized area consists of the city itself and the suburbs. And this US Bureau of the Census decided that there are two types of urban areas. If the population is 50,000 or above, it is called an urbanized area. So an urbanized area is an urban area that consists of the city and its suburb, but the population must be 50,000 or more. If the population of that city and its suburb is less than 50,000, it is known as an urban cluster. So if we are talking about Awaso and its suburbs, it could be considered an urban cluster. Whereas if we are talking about Tulsa and its suburb, it is definitely an urbanized area. Okay, just a minute. Oh, this nonsense. Yes. Okay. So, can somebody give us an example of an urbanized area apart from Tulsa? Can somebody give us an example of an urbanized area?
Like OKC?
Yes, Oklahoma City, thank you. The urbanized area will consist of OKC itself and the suburbs, which might include Edmond and other areas around here. An urban cluster could be Claremont if it has a few suburbs, or Catoosa. No, Catoosa is part of Tulsa. So, think of some of those cities in the south, McAllister and others could be urban cluster. The McAllister is there and some of the suburbs, but they are small in people, in numbers, and they are definitely below 50,000. So if it is below 50,000, you still have the city and its suburbs, but if the population is below 50,000, it is referred to as an urban area known as urban cluster. But if the population is 50,000 or more, it is definitely an urbanized area. So all of these big urban areas with 50,000 or more are urbanized areas, and those urban areas with less than 50,000 are urban clusters.
Okay.
This Bureau of the Census also about 40 years ago decided that the functioning unit settlement of an urban area should be bigger. So they decided to formulate a component which is known as the Metropolitan Statistical Area. This metropolitan statistical is a large functioning unit within a settlement. It consists of the urbanized area. We know by now that the urbanized area must have the city and its suburbs, but must have 50,000 people or more. It also includes the county that urbanized area is located and adjacent counties with high population. But more importantly, a good number of people in these adjacent counties interact with the city's county.
Yeah.
Yes. If all of this happens and the population is still less than 50,000, it is known as micropolitan statistical area. But if the population is 50,000 or more, of course, it is known as metropolitan statistical area.
Okay.
Let's take a look at this example here. This is where you have the city. This dotted line is the boundary line of the suburb. And this city and suburb form the urbanized area. Then you have adjacent county B, adjacent county D that have high population density. But more importantly, a good number of people here and here commute to work in this county, go to this county to watch sporting activities, drive to this county to dine, drive to this county for other activities. So much interaction with this adjacent county and the county where that city is located.
Okay.
If it is small, like we see here, it is a micropolitan statistical area because you have this urban cluster, less than 50,000. And even when you include the adjacent county, it's still less than 50,000 people. They can commute and come around this area, but it is still less than 50,000. So Awaso and its surrounding can be considered an urban cluster, whereas the case of Tulsa, it's a metropolitan, Awaso and the surrounding county can be considered a micropolitan statistical area, whereas the metropolitan statistical area can be Tulsa. Let's just look at this next one and try to overlap Tulsa here. So let's imagine that this is Tulsa, the city of Tulsa. Then these are and this is the county where Tulsa is, the city of Tulsa and the county of Tulsa. Then these are the suburb of Tulsa, Bixby, Catoosa, Sapulpa, etc. Then these are the neighboring counties with high population density: Roger County, Williams County, Craig County, etc. All of these are around about 8 of them for Tulsa that have high population density. But more importantly, large number of people here commute to Tulsa County regularly. Either they work in Tulsa, or they go to Buckley for another sporting arenas for sport, or they go to shop, or they go to dine, etc., etc. Or they go to parks, the mall, etc., etc. So that is, all of this put together is the metropolitan statistical area. In this case, we're just overlapping. We're going to talk about St. Louis, but let's just say this is Tulsa, city of Tulsa. And this is the county where Tulsa is. And these are the neighboring suburbs of Tulsa. All of this is the urbanized area, the city and its suburbs. But you have all of these adjacent counties also that have high density. But more importantly, a good number of people in Craig County, in William County, in Roger County commute and interact with the city, the Tulsa County regularly. So when you put all of this, you have the metropolitan statistical area. What we see here is the case of St. Louis, Missouri. You have the St. Louis city, you have the county, you have the suburbs, which make up the urbanized area, and you have several adjacent counties around that have high population density, but more importantly, a good number of them commute regularly, some even daily, to the county of St. Louis. Okay. If you have metropolitan areas, as we have in the Northeast, that are conjoined, they overlap to the extent you can see it as one continuous territory, there's a term for it. It is known as megalopolis. So if you go to Boston, you have metropolitan area. You go to New York, you have metropolitan area. You go to Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., but all of them overlap, and you see it as one continuous territory. And that is known as megalopolis. On the ground there, on paper, they can distinguish one of the statistical metropolitan statistical area from the other. But if you drive there, along there, You're going to see it as one continuous urban area. So it is megalopolis. Several metropolitan areas sort of conjoin. So it's megalopolis. The one from Boston all the way to DC. Then there's another one in Japan known as Tokaido corridor, all the way from Tokyo to Yokohama or to Nagoya, all conjoin as one continuous urban region. There's a smaller one here also in California, from Los Angeles all the way to the border with Mexico in a town known as Tijuana. That's another example. Then there's one, the West Great Lakes from Chicago to Milwaukee and on the east part of Pittsburgh. But the biggest one at megalopolis are the one in the northeastern corridor, north of Boston all the way to south of Washington, D.C., continuous territory. And the one in Japan from Tokyo to Yokohama onto Nagoya. Questions? Comments? Okay. So this is what I'm talking about here. From Boston all the way through Philadelphia, New York, Philadelphia, on to DC. All of this have several metropolitan areas, but all of them are conjoined. They overlap. You just see it as one continuous urban region. That's why they call it big megalopolis. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about downtown. The downtown is technically known as the central business district. It is the most central place of any city. And it has high concentration of services from public to business to consumer. Why is it the most central place? Why is it located where it is the most central place?
Because it makes it more easier to access, right? Like,
yes, thank you very much. It is the most accessible part of a city. All the modes of transportation converge there. Whether it's a freeway or a highway or a train, passenger train line, all of them converge there. So as a result, it is the most accessible place of a city. That's why it has so many services, especially business services. Let's start with the public services. What are some of the services, public services found in the downtown area of a city? Whether it's a small city like Claremont or a large city like Dallas, what are some of the public services found in the downtown area of a city?
I want to say something like a real estate advisor, but I'm not really sure about that one.
Well, that one will be under business service.
Okay, okay.
Yes, so public services in downtown areas. Think about the court. The court.
Oh.
Yes, the public library, the city library. Many a time is found in downtown area. The court is found in downtown area. Then you might have a police station found in downtown area of a city. In big cities that have convention centers, you can have the convention center, which is like a community center, but it's huge. Convention center is found in downtown areas of a city. Yes. Then when we talk about business services, what are some of the business services that are found in downtown areas of cities?
You got your like large shopping malls, different businesses that have used like restaurants and everything else like that.
Yeah, those are consumer services. You may recall, those are all consumer services.
Oh.
What about business services? Banks.
Oh yeah.
Insurance companies. Some of them are found in the downtown areas of cities. Yes. Offices of professional workers. A good number of lawyers' offices are in downtown areas of city. You might have the management consultant. You might have some corporate headquarters located in the downtown areas. Not all, but some of them. Then what you've just mentioned, Matt, are the consumer services, the BARS, the restaurants, the hotels, the holiday inns. All of those are part of consumer services. Yeah. We used to have a large number of department stores in downtown areas, but they have been relocated into suburbs. Why? Why has there been shift of stores that require high threshold and high range from downtown areas, from the CBD, the central businesses? Most of them are now relocated in suburbs. Why? Because most people live in suburbs. And for you to have a high threshold, you must be able to meet that threshold. A good number of us live in suburbs. Very, very few people reside in cities. Very, very few. So because of that, most people have moved over the past 60, 70 years to suburbs. That is why we have heavy concentration of departmental stores in suburbs that require large threshold, unlike in the past when they were found in close to the downtown, the CBD.
Okay.
But you still have some specialty stores that require high range. For instance, if you go to Chicago, close to the downtown area, you have an area known as Magnificent Mile, where you have some specialty stores with brand names. In fact, the billionaire Oprah Winfrey has a store in that area of Chicago, Magnificent Miles. This is a store where people from around the world, about 3 years ago I was there, I met people all the way from Africa, tourists shopping. My brother and I was looking around and we saw a jacket, a winter jacket, and the jacket was $950. So we looked around a little bit and then we left the store because we cannot spend $950. We can't afford it on a winter jacket. So those specialty stores that have high range prefer to locate in the central business district because it is the most accessible place. Not only for Americans, but some of them tourist cities that attract tourists can get tourists from various parts of the world to come there and they will shop, in addition to Americans within that city or that state or even in neighboring states.
Okay.
Okay, a question for the class. What are some of the retail services required by those that work in downtown areas of cities? There are some basic retail services. If you work in a bank, in a BOK center, for instance, you might need some services. What are some of?
Well, they have to eat lunch.
Yes. So restaurants, things like Subway, what do you call it? Coffee in the morning, Starbucks can be located there. What else apart from restaurants? They also will have a computer appliance store. They might need some component parts for their computer. They will have a Kinko's. Some might need to do to copy. They will have a FedEx. Some people might need to post. There could be a shoe shiner not far away. Then there could be a laundry mat where people will take their suit or whatever dress for it to be dry clean.
Yeah.
Yes, so all of those are found are retail services that are available for downtown workers. Of course, the restaurant has to be there, the Starbucks, the Subway has to be there, then Kinko's, FedEx, the computer appliance or parts store, shoe shining, and laundry. Yeah, those are things. Yeah. So for business services downtown, we know them: the banks, the insurance companies, information service, journalism, marketing, advertising companies are found in downtown areas of cities. The bigger the city, the more those business services are there. Then the lawyers, the management accountant, with all the improvement in telecommunication, lawyers discuss things face to face. Management consultants, some of them discuss something face to face. You know, it's not everything on the phone. They don't want to be recorded. They might want to solve a case out of court, a civil lawsuit or something. They might want to discuss with the other parties face to face. Or even apart from solving a case or whatever, they still want to interact face to face. So business services, professional workers, a good number of them are still found in offices in downtown. This is an example of a downtown area, Mobile, Alabama. Notice, amongst other things, we have the convention center here, number 9. At number 5, we have Regions Bank Building. This is a business service in downtown area. Number 7, RSA Trust Mark. This could be an insurance company. So we see several business services in downtown area. The convention center here, number 9, Mobile Convention Center, is a public service. And then at number 13, we have the Hampton Inn. This also is a leisure and hospitality, part of consumer service. Remember, hotels are part of hospitality, which is a subsector of consumer services. And this is typical. Most big cities have convention centers, amongst other things, hotels and banks in downtown areas. The CBD, which we call downtown, is a small component of an urban area. In most cities, it's 2% of the land area or less. So if there is stiff competition for land, what happens with price?
Oh, Well, it would make the price go up, right? If there was competition.
Exactly. If there is competition for scarce land, the price is going to be very, very high. So that is typical of cities, downtown areas, especially for big cities. The downtown areas is so costly.
Mm-hmm.
So that led to what is called vertical development, which started way back in about 1870, the construction of skyscrapers. A number of skyscrapers will have 5 or more floors below ground level. Then you start the ground level, and some of them are 60 stories, 70, 80. The tallest in America is the Wills Tower in Chicago, which is 110 stories.
Mm-hmm.
For the Wills Tower, I know that there is 10 story underground. Okay, a question for the class. What are some of these activities that are done underground? Those like in Wills Tower, the first 10 story underground. Some skyscrapers will be 5 story underground. What are some of the what is the 5 story underground used for in most areas where you have skyscrapers?
I would imagine it would be like you said underground, right?
Yes, the first 5 stories underground, below ground level.
I imagine it'd be for structure, right? Or like storage, or imagine
Yes,
something like
storage
that.
is one. One of it is storage. Then secondly, you come with the semi being thing for that skyscraper for offices there. They're going to offload them at that underground level. Then they're going to store them there. Then utilities, land telephone line cables, electric cables for that skyscraper. Those cables are passed underground. Other things like sewage pipes are passed underground. Yes, so that place, that underground. Some even have car parking underground. Yes, so car parking, storage, for getting things off, what do you call it, semis, etc. Then all of those utility cables, electric cables, landline telephone cables are passed underground within those underground areas.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the first 5 story of most skyscrapers where the restaurants are and the retail stores. You don't want a retail store at the 70th floor. How much time are you going to spend to wait for an elevator to take you to the 78th floor for you to have your Starbucks coffee in the morning, or your Subway or your lunch in the afternoon?
Yeah.
And many a time, if your lunchtime is not just for you, you have to eat and you have to communicate with your better half.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, if you call her or him, especially the her, if you call her every lunchtime after you eating, and 1 or 2 days you don't call her, you might run into serious trouble. Honey, why didn't you call me today? You used to call me every day. I not hear you. You not call me yesterday and today. What is happening? What is really happening? You might run into a serious problem. So typically, the retail stores, restaurants, etc., and the first 5 story for convenience. You can just use an escalator. You can just roll to the second or third floor and get your lunch, as the case may be. Yeah. After that 5th floor, from about the 6th floor on to about, let's say it's a 70-story building. From the 6th floor till about the 58th floor, you have offices.
Yeah.
That is where
Cubicles.
you have offices like those professional workers, the management, those corporate headquarters offices will be there. Not just headquarters, but corporate offices will be there.
Mm-hmm.
Then around, after that 50th floor, it's a 70-floor building. Around that 55 floor to 64, you have residential. You have apartments. Some of them are really expensive. Where a good number of business people or rich people can have an apartment. I still recall there used to be a basketball player who about 12 years ago bought an apartment on the 67th floor of Wills Tower, the 110-story building in Chicago. He bought it for $2 million. He said he wants to go there and relax to avoid friends and family members who can torment him at times. So about 12 years ago, he bought that apartment. I think it was a 3-bedroom apartment for $2 million. So those skyscrapers are mainly occupied by top-notch business people. Mm-hmm. Then if you go towards closer to the 78th floor, if it's a 70-story skyscrapers, you might have some club offices. Some clubs will have like Rotary Club or Golf Club or whatever. They can rent some of those for club meetings. That is like where the clubs will meet, whether it's a Rotary Club or a golf club or something else. And swimming club, they can occupy those places. Yeah. How many of you have entered a skyscraper that is 50 story or more tall?
Oh, I definitely have, yeah.
What did you observe whilst you were in the building?
Uh, well, I mean, I just was on the I was just hanging around mainly the main floor, the first floor, and you
Oh,
just imagine you see like a lot of density going by, you know.
yes. I've been to the presidential building in Chicago, 95 story. When you're up there, any building that is taller than 60 story, it is not stable. It is shifting, a minimal shifting, but it is not stable. You see,
Mm,
it goes a bit this way and goes this way. It's a minute shift, but it is not stable. Skyscrapers below 60 stories are fine, but anything above 60, 70 to 80 story, it is not stable. I said to myself, I would not like to have an office up here
mm.
because it's just not stable. Yeah, okay. So in big cities where skyscrapers are in North America, manufacturing is excluded. We don't have any manufacturing because one, there is a zoning ordinance. Two, you just cannot afford to buy that land, even if it's available. And many times it's not even available. But there are zoning ordinance which will not allow a manufacturing in the downtown area,
Mhm.
typically. Most of these factories we know by now, they need large areas for one-story buildings, and most of those are found in suburbs or in countryside. We addressed that when we were looking at manufacturing. One thing that has been developing in some downtown areas, I can speak of Chicago, is that some people are now moving back to the cities, especially those that don't have kids or their kids are of age 18 and above. They move to some of these condominiums in downtown areas.
Mhm.
And they say, I asked one, I have a family member, a family friend in Chicago. 5 years ago, I asked him, why did you decide to move to an apartment in downtown areas? His response, I want to be close to my office. I'm tired of driving a lot. I want to be close to the restaurants and the BARS. I want to be close to the sporting arena, shoulder town, etc., to watch baseball, to watch football, etc.
Make it easier for the individual.
Yes, it's easier, but it is expensive. Then I asked the wife, how much are you paying for this two-bedroom apartment? It was $2,000 a month. That was 5 years ago.
Oof.
Just two-bedroom apartment. So if you want to do less driving, and they have to pay for parking separately. Parking is not part, they are not provided with parking. So if you want to live in those places, it's not a phenomenon that is widespread in America, but it is growing gradually. I can speak of Chicago. A good number of people that are single, young ones, or people that don't have kids or kids are of age move to these downtown areas, but it's very expensive. But in general, apart from hotels, which are not permanent residents, people don't reside in downtown areas. You go to a hotel, it's just for a few days. But this phenomenon is new, but it's not widespread. A case in point in Chicago, where some people have moved to the downtown areas and occupy apartments which are, for the common man, expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. In outside of North America, most of the downtown areas are a bit different. The structure is different. Most of them were built during the medieval days, even though they've expanded them a bit, but those medieval structures are there. If you go to a downtown area in Sicily, in Italy, or in Rome, in Italy, you will see religious features. We see those basilica or other religious features. You will see museums and
Hmm.
other historic structures, and you will see parks. It is not dominated by commercial activities. Yes, you will have a few stores, shops, who they call shop, we call them stores, but it's not dominant by commercial activities. You have a few, you will have some business activities, but it's not dominant there. Yeah, unlike here, where in the business activities are whatnot are in large numbers. Our cities are mainly comparatively new. We have some old cities like Boston, Chicago, but when you talk about the medieval days, you are talking about 1100, 1200. Some of these cities in Italy, in places like Spain, have been built way back in the 11 and 1200 medieval time.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to talk about three models of urban development, urban structure. But before we look at those three models, I would like us to watch these two short clips. The one about Chicago, please pay attention to the closed caption. There is a musical background, but there is no narrator. Then that will be followed by a short clip about the city of London. and that has a narrator. So let's take a look at these two short clips before we address the three models of urban structure. The next one is about the city of London.
Are you wasting your evenings and weekends pricing jobs for free that never progress in?
There are 9 million people in a city full of historical landmarks, many of which can be viewed from a cruise on the River Thames. Westminster Abbey has been used for all the coronations since the year 1308. The Houses of Parliament, Big Ben, the Egyptian obelisk, and Buckingham Palace continue to be on every tourist's itinerary. There is a fascination with Kensington Palace, where flowers are still placed for the late Princess Diana. Harrods is a famous department store with price tags just as fancy. Double-decker buses and bright red phone booths are the city's trademarks. Memorabilia of the royal family is everywhere, including the recognizable uniform of the Horse Guards. There are many popular meeting points in London, but none more so than Piccadilly Circus, a dynamic area of people, traffic, colour and noise. Artists and buskers share centre stage, hoping to be the next discovery. This is a very busy area, within a short walking distance from a network of eateries and popular night spots. London comes alive at night when it seems that every tourist in the country is looking for action. There is free entertainment in pedestrian areas and the best in live theatre. Some restaurants offer a memorable view of London Bridge against a romantic midnight sky.
Any comment?
The London one really the London one really kind of, you know, it summed it up about the whole why it was so different from America, you know.
Yeah, yes. You see the buildings, most of them are what we call the Victorian and Elizabethan architecture, old, yeah. And they always repair them and preserve them. Yes, but you see, Chicago is comparatively new compared. In fact, Chicago had a problem. The city was burnt down accidentally in 1870. So thereafter, they had to rebuild the city of Chicago after that massive fire in 1870.
Oh.
Okay, let's talk about the three models. The first was, interestingly, all three models were written between First World War, after the end of First World War and towards the end of Second World War. Sociologist E.W. Burgess said that cities grow outward from a central area in the form of rings, just like you have three rings. So he was a sociologist. He looked at the city of Chicago and said, you have the central business district, which we call downtown, where even in 1923, there were very, very few residential activities. So it was a concentration of business services with very minimal, if any, residential. Then the second zone is the zone of transition. This is where the manufacturing industries were located then and had poor quality housing. You may recall that this was the period where a number of immigrants were coming from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe. Most of them were working in these factories and lived in poor quality housing. Then the next zone of working class had modest but older houses. Then the other zone was of better residents, middle class people. They had newer and more spacious housing. And the final zone was beyond the built-up area, known as the commuter zone. To get a clear understanding, let's take a look at the diagram. So in zone 1 is non-commercial, the central business district. Buildings have been there, shopping centers, shopping centers, offices, public services, but not dominated by residential. The next zone here, zone 2, was where there was some manufacturing industry those days. And as I said, Americans were involved, but immigrants, newly arrived immigrants, were mainly involved in these factories, working in these factories. Then you had the next zone, which was the real workers zone, independent workers in zone 3 with old buildings, modest building. Then you have the middle class at zone 4, spacious and newer buildings, and you have the outer areas and zone 5. That was what Burgess, as a sociologist, found out. His major example was the city of Chicago. Later, in 1939, a land economics, Homer Hoyt, said, cities are not organized like rings, they're organized like sectors, because there are some sectors that are better for some activities, unlike some other sectors. It says as city grows, activities expand outward in the form of a wedge or sector from the center. So according to Homer Hoyt in 1939, it said, you still have the central business district here, zone 1, but next to it is transportation and manufacturing industry, zone 2. Then zone 3 is low-class residential. Zone 3 is here, low-class residential. Low-class residential is zone 3, here, this one, here and here. Notice they are next to the factories. Then zone 4 is middle-class residential, here and here. And zone 5 is high-class. But what is interesting, according to Hoyt, is that even if you're a middle class, those middle class people that are better off socioeconomically will build their houses at the edge of this sector. So let's say in 1939, you had $1 million, let's say you have $250,000, your house might be built here compared to somebody who makes, okay, let's just say annual income. Let's say you are making $20,000 as a middle class, your house must be here. And somebody that was making $30,000 house will be towards the edge because they are of higher status, even though all of you are middle class. So for the high class residential, let's say your business profit was $500,000 a year. Your house might be here or about here. But if you are making $1 or $1.5 million and CEO take home a year, your house will be further. The same high class, but your house, the richer one's location, housing is located closer to the edge of that sector.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. So that was what Omar Hoyt said. He says, as you move further, I mean, you are in the same sector, you are still high class, but those that are richer will have houses towards the edge of that sector compared to those that are not as rich as them. You see, so that was what he said. Later on in 1945, two geographers, C.D. Harris and E.L. Holman, said cities are not so simple to be organized like sectors or rings. Cities are much more complex. So they came up with what is known as a multi-nuclei model. They say you still have the CBD, the Central Business District, but there are various nodes in which activities occur. Some of them are interrelated. For example, if you have a port, you will have transportation nodes, transportation within that port area. You might have a storage place. If you have a university, you might have, of course, restaurants close by. You might have a gym close by. A few BARS for those above 21. Remember, the BARS are for those above 21. Those will be close to that university. If you have an airport, more recently, airport will have, what do we call it? A car rental close by, a storage facility close by, some freeways or highways leading to that airport, etc., etc. So for them, they looked at cities as more complex. Remember, these are geographers. C.D. Harris and Ullman were geographers, whereas Hoyt was land economist and Burgess was a sociologist. So they say a city is more complex, organized in this format. You still have the Zone 1, the Central Business District. Then you have Zone 2, which is light manufacturing next to here. Zone 3 is low class. Remember those days, the manufacturing was, the low class people, the poor, were living next to the manufacturing centers. Then Zone 4 is medium class residential here. So if you look at the diagram proper, this is Zone 4. And this is Zone 5, high class residential. But what do we see between zones 4 and 5? Zones 4 and 5, we see Zone 7, which is outlying business district. This is common. If you go to some of the newer suburbs that have mainly some of the rich people, and you have the middle class in the adjacent suburbs, what do you see increasingly? You see shopping center in between. I observed that in northern Chicago, where there's a big mall between that Zone 4 and Zone 5. If you go to some other big cities also, between that middle class and the upper class, if I should say, there is normally a shopping center that both of them will be using. If we take a look at this diagram, it's almost equidistant, although it seems closer to the rich, Zone 5, because some of the people in Zone 4 will have to drive a long distance to get to this mall. But it seems to be closer to Zone 5, where you have more rich people. Of course, all other things being equal, they will patronize this shopping center better than those in Zone 4, who are rich but not as rich as those in Zone 5. Then what do we see here? We have Zone 8, which is residential suburbs. These are the newer suburbs that have been built. Look at how distant it is. And Zone 9 is industrial suburb. See what we see here. Industrial suburb is manufacturing, but it is far away from residential. You see, the Zone 9, which is industrial, is close to another industrial, heavy in manufacturing Zone 6, but it is far away. The nearest residential that it is are the poor, the low class. But the very rich, look at them, Zones 4 and 5, they are far away from any factory, you know. And that is part of the zoning ordinances we have now. But even way back in 1945, when this model was written, you see the very rich are not located close to a factory. Okay, we'll pick it up from here. We're going to expand on these models, apply them next lecture on Thursday. Please don't forget to get your quiz completed today. And then, of course, your extra credit is due on Thursday. And remember, your assignment 4 has been extended to next Tuesday, when we'll be addressing resources, energy, environment and resources. Any question for me? If there's any question, please don't hesitate to ask. You can send me an email. And if there is no question or comment, I will pick it up from here on Thursday. We'll look at the various components that we have not yet addressed. We'll address them on Thursday. And your role-playing exercise on Thursday will be an assignment. I've already created somewhere that you will upload it. As the same for the quiz, which we're going to do online today.
Okay.
Yes. So if there is no question for me, I will see you all on Thursday. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of the day. I'll see you on Thursday.
You too. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks. Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Yeah, see you.